Every film has something in it that a power, and then you go, okay, what's necessary, what's not necessary. It does not mean that I will not play the devil in a movie, but the difference is I don't go to the devil to ask him how to play him. I go to God to teach me how to play this, because when I do, it should unearth you. There was a film I did with Denzel Washington, Deja Vu, and that had a lot to do with it. And so I got to write my monologue and piece in there with Denzel. Tony Scott and Jerry Bruckheimer allowed me to do it. But I looked at a lot of the, along the way, I've always got to work with really good agents, ATF, FBI, CIA, all, and I write notes down. And then I bring that back into the script. And when I got to watch some of the interrogations that I got to see, you always hear another voice coming out of these guys, like the devil speaking right through them, and talking about their destiny, their making their maker, their time, and I just would write a lot of that down, and I would pray deeply about it and going into the scene, because when an individual watches the movie, watching film, time suspends itself. You know, if I said to you, you're going to sit in this room in that chair for 2 hours, but if the actors play it right, you're so entranced into the film that time just goes by like that. And so I'm still that 14, 15-year-old kid that watches a movie, and in my mindset say, what would keep me on the edge of my seat? What would keep me entranced into this character? And the Passion of the Christ was very brutal, especially when we went to the Cat of Nine Tails. Again, where I'm working with the best people in the world that are revealing to me, this is really what happened. So when we were looking at like the Shroud of Turin, you can see the Shroud of Turin is a image of Jesus, and when you start going into the track lines on his body, you can see the bamboo sticks the Romans would have used on him. But then you all see the deep ones where it looks like the Grand Canyon in your skin, and they like. I remember Keith Vanderland saying people will go into shock now when they see this. I mean, this is a Cat of Nine Tails. This is horrific. And he said, I'll take him to the edge. So it was very brutal. But in that particular case, that violence was important because that violence is our sin. So it's always about committing to what this film needs to be. If you use every profanity in the book constantly, eventually you get numb to it. But you use it once, it'll hit you if you need it, if it's necessary in the film. Like, for example, if you watched It's a Wonderful Life, that film was very profound in its time and very hard to watch. And during Christmas, the most beautiful time of year. And you don't want to drop an F-bomb in that movie, you know? But if you watch it, it's very powerful because this guy wants to end his life. It's over. He doesn't see what his value in his life, and this angel comes to him and shows him, George, don't you understand? If you weren't around, these people they would never made it without you. We have to look at our lives like that. One of the most profound scenes in that movie was when Jimmy Stewart, Capra, had that camera on him. He says, God, if you're out there, please help me. And those were real tears. That man flew 26 missions in a Liberator over Germany, World War II. And you understand that when you're flying over in that tight formation and one of those planes goes out, everybody has to remain quiet on their comms. Stewart lived with PTSD his entire life, and especially in that scene. And I'm sure that trauma played out there, but God used it in the most beautiful way. Just as some of the trauma that I grew up with, God used it in the most profound way in films like Sound of Freedom, or the Passion of the Christ.
When you got word about the project Passion of the Christ, it almost sounds like, well, how did you get word about that film?
Crazy. I mean, if you... so I get a call that I knew Mel Gibson was, but I did not know it was Steve McAvity. And that was his key producer, main guy. That guy did Braveheart, which was the previous film Mel had directed 15 years earlier. And so they invited me to do a film about what it was. I think it was Tom Hanks and Mel Gibson were going to do this together. It was on Mavericks. It was the big surfing wave. And the director that wanted to direct it was Kevin Reynolds, who just directed me in The Count of Monte Cristo. So I went to meet them, and Mel wasn't even supposed to show up, but he did about 40 minutes in. And we were talking about the movie. I didn't think the script was there yet. Now, that was going to be a hard film to shoot because I'm not a surfer, but I was a basketball player. So I thought maybe, anyway, but the material wasn't there. And I was talking to him about the material, and then all of a sudden Mel pivot to something. And then I went back to when I was a young man in the theater. And I said, oh my God, this is why he called me to become an actor. And I said, you want me to play Jesus, don't you? And he looked at me, he was smoking a cigarette, and he just, yeah, put his head down. And he was really scared. And I said, okay. He just, what? What? Like, how can you, what? Okay. So I had all that preparation.
What was the fear, do you think?
Well, 2 days later, he called me at my house, and I was taking the garbage out. And I heard, I picked up the phone, and I said, yeah, I was busy. And he goes, hey, Jim, it's Mel. And I said, Mel who? And he goes, I don't know, Mel Brooks. Hey, he was smoking a cigarette, and he goes, do you still want to play this Jesus guy? If you do, you may never work in this town again. And I was like, scared. It scared me. I was telling you, I just bought a Lamborghini. And I was, I'm going to have to give all this stuff back. And I was scared for a moment, and then this peace came over me. And I could feel it. It was from heaven. And I said, look, man, we're all called to carry our cross. If you don't pick up and carry your cross, you will be crushed by the weight of it. And then he got really quiet on the phone. And then I said, oh my God. He said, what? I said, I just realized my initials are JC and I'm 33 years old. And he goes, God, you're freaking me out. And he hung up the phone. And then McAvity came probably 5 days later. And then that was it.
Did Mel have fear too, to ask?
Sure he was.
What do you think his fear was?
None of us are good enough to do it. None of us are. It's because of who we are, our past, everything, what we're talking about. But the shame. But I told my friend about that. His name was Ivan. And I said, he said, Jim, God doesn't always choose the best, but he chose you. What are you going to do about it?